He was the most powerful man on the plane, but he was wearing a $20 hoodie. So, the head flight attendant didn't just deny him a meal. She tried to have him arrested. She thought she was protecting the elite passengers from a thug. She had no idea that the man she was humiliating had just bought the entire airline that morning. What happens when a prejudiced crew member pushes a billionaire too far? You're about to see a firing so brutal and so public it made aviation history. This is the story of Damian Sterling, and why you never judge a book by its cover. The rain was hammering against the glass walls of JFK Terminal 4, creating a grey, miserable backdrop for what was supposed to be a celebration. Damian Sterling adjusted the hood of his charcoal grey sweatshirt, pulling it lower over his eyes. He wasn't hiding from the paparazzi. Not yet, anyway. He was just exhausted. 48 hours. That's how long he'd been awake. The acquisition of AeroVantage Airlines had been the most grueling negotiation of his career. The lawyers had screamed, the previous board had cried, but the ink was finally dry. As of 6 a.m. this morning, Damian Sterling, the boy who grew up in the projects of Chicago, owned the fleet of jets sitting on the tarmac outside. He hadn't had time to shower, let alone change into one of his bespoke Italian suits. He was wearing track pants, worn-out sneakers, and a hoodie he'd had since college. He looked less like a billionaire CEO and more like someone who had slept on a bench in the terminal. Flight 882 to London Heathrow is now boarding first class and diamond medallion members, the gate agent announced. Damian grabbed his duffel bag. He had reserved seat 1A, the most exclusive seat on the plane. He just wanted to sleep for 7 hours and wake up in London to fire the existing CEO, Robert Gantry. He shuffled toward the priority lane. The woman standing at the podium, a gate agent named Brenda, looked up from her computer. Her eyes scanned Damian from his scuffed sneakers to his unshaven jaw. She didn't smile. "Sir, general boarding is in 20 minutes, Brenda said, her voice dripping with that specific kind of polite condescension, airline staff perfect over decades. Zone 4 is that way. She pointed a manicured finger toward the crowded economy waiting area. Damian didn't stop walking. "I'm in first," he said, his voice raspy from lack of sleep. He held out his phone with the digital boarding pass. Brenda didn't even look at the screen. She physically stepped in front of the scanner. "Sir, please step aside. You're blocking the lane for our priority customers." Behind Damian, a man in a beige trench coat cleared his throat loudly. "Come on, kid, move it. Some of us actually paid for our tickets." Damian took a deep breath. The old Damian would have snapped. The new Damian, the one who just spent $4 billion, simply held his ground. "Scan the code, Brenda." She blinked, startled by his use of her name. Reluctantly, she grabbed the scanner gun and aimed it at his phone, expecting the angry red error beep. Beep! A cheerful green light flashed. 1A, Sterling D. Brenda stared at the screen. She looked at Damian, then back at the screen. "Systems must be glitching today," she muttered, not apologizing. "Go ahead. But keep your bag under the seat. We don't want the overhead bins cluttered." Damian walked down the jet bridge, the adrenaline of the confrontation waking him up slightly. He hoped the crew on board would be better. He was wrong. Standing at the door of the aircraft was Patricia. If Brenda was the gatekeeper, Patricia was the warden. She was the purser, the head flight attendant, wearing the navy blue AeroVantage uniform that was slightly too tight, her blonde hair pulled back in a bun, so severe it pulled at her eyebrows. She was greeting passengers with a dazzling fake smile. "Welcome aboard, Mr. Caldwell," she beamed at the man in the trench coat. "Good to see you again." Then she saw Damian. The smile vanished instantly. It was like a shutter coming down. Boarding pass, she demanded, holding out her hand. She didn't say, welcome. She didn't say, sir. Damien held up his phone again. Seat 1A. Patricia let out a sharp, derisive laugh. 1A. That's a corporate hold seat. It's usually reserved for pilots deadheading or... She peered closely at his phone, her eyes narrowing. Did you use miles for this? Or is this an employee non-rev ticket? Does it matter? Damien asked, stepping onto the plane. It's a paid ticket. Let me see your ID, Patricia said, blocking the aisle. You don't need my ID at the aircraft door, Damien said, his patience thinning. The gate agent already checked it. I have discretion to check anyone who looks suspicious, Patricia said, her voice loud enough that the business class passengers settling in were now watching. We've had issues with people sneaking into cabins they don't belong in. Patricia, Damien said, reading her name tag. I am tired. I am sitting in 1A. If you have a problem with security, call the ground team. Otherwise, move. He pushed past her, his shoulder brushing hers. Don't you touch me, Patricia squawked, clutching her pearls. That's assault! Damien ignored her, dropped his bag into the overhead bin of 1A, and collapsed into the wide leather seat. He closed his eyes. Just 7 hours, he told himself. Then I fire everyone. He didn't know that Patricia was already in the galley, whispering furiously to her junior flight attendant, a nervous young man named Timothy. Watch him, Patricia hissed, glaring at the back of Damien's head. He's a scammer. I know the type. Stolen credit card or a system hack. He's not getting a drop of champagne on my watch. The cabin was filling up. The first-class cabin on the Boeing 777 was intimate, with only 8 suites. It was a world of soft lighting, hot towels and hushed tones. To Damien's right, in seat 1K, sat Mr. Caldwell, the trench coat man. He was already sipping a glass of Dom Perignon, chatting loudly on his cell phone about shorting the tech stocks. Timothy, the junior flight attendant, walked down the aisle with a silver tray filled with crystal flutes of champagne and small porcelain bowls of warm nuts. He looked terrified. He approached Damien's seat. Sir, would you like a pre-departure? Timothy! Patricia's voice cracked like a whip from the galley. Timothy froze. Patricia marched over, snatched the tray from his hands, and smiled tightly at Damien. We are running low on the vintage champagne, she lied smoothly. We have to save it for our full-fare revenue passengers. I can get you a cup of water? Or maybe some orange juice from the economy cart? Damien opened one eye. He looked at the bottle of Dom Perignon sitting in the ice bucket 5 feet away. It was unopened. The bottle is right there, Patricia, Damien said calmly. That's reserved for dinner service, she snapped. She turned her back on him and leaned over to Mr. Caldwell. Another top-up, Mr. Caldwell. You know we always take care of our VIPs. Caldwell chuckled, eyeing Damien with amusement. Keep an eye on your wallet, Patricia. Letting the riff-raff in up front. The neighborhood is going to hell. Patricia laughed, a shrill, sycophantic sound. Don't worry, sir. I'm watching him like a hawk. He won't get away with anything. Damien clenched his jaw. He pulled his phone out and sent a text to his assistant, Sarah, in New York. Send me the full personnel file on the crew of Flight 882, specifically the purser. Now. The plane pushed back from the gate. The safety video played. Damien stared out the window, watching the rain streak horizontally as they accelerated. He felt the familiar push of gravity as the jet lifted off. Once they reached cruising altitude, the smell of food began to waft through the cabin. It was the signature AeroVantage first-class menu: lobster thermidor, wagyu beef sliders, and truffle risotto. Damien's stomach growled. He hadn't eaten since a stale bagel in Chicago yesterday. He pulled the large menu card from the seat pocket. He was looking forward to the wagyu, Patricia began the service. She laid a white linen tablecloth on Mr. Caldwell's tray table. She placed silverware, a salt and pepper shaker shaped like little airplanes, and a bread basket. Then she moved to the woman in 2A. Same treatment. Linen, silver, bread. She skipped 1A. She moved to 2K. Damien waited. He assumed she was doing a specific pattern. But then she went back to the galley. 10 minutes passed. Mr. Caldwell was already eating his appetizer, smoked salmon with caviar. Damien pressed the call button. Ding. Patricia ignored it. She walked past him to refill Caldwell's wine. Damien pressed it again. Ding. Nothing. Damien unbuckled his seatbelt and stood up. He walked to the galley. Patricia was leaning against the counter, eating a bread roll and scrolling on her phone. Timothy was organizing the carts. "Excuse me," Damien said. Patricia jumped, dropping her phone. "You are required to stay in your seat when the sign is on." "The sign is off, Patricia," Damien said, pointing to the unlit seatbelt sign. "You skipped my meal service." Patricia wiped crumbs from her mouth. She crossed her arms. "Look, let's cut the charade. I checked the manifest. You're a status upgrade, system generated." And, she smirked, "we ran out of the first-class meals. Catering error. We only loaded enough for the paying customers. You know how it is. Last one in, first one left out." "You have 8 seats," Damien said, his voice dropping an octave. "You have 8 passengers. Airlines load 10 meals minimum for this cabin." "You are lying." "Are you calling me a liar?" Patricia stepped closer, invading his personal space. "Listen to me, you little hood rat. I don't know who you scammed to get that seat, but I am not serving Wagyu beef to someone dressed like a drug dealer. I have a sandwich from the economy crew meal. Cheese and pickle. I can bring you that. Take it or leave it." Damien stared at her. This wasn't just bad service. This was active discrimination. "I want the meal listed on the menu," Damien said. "Or I want your name, your employee ID, and the captain involved." Patricia's eyes went wide. Then they narrowed into slits. "You're threatening a crew member," she whispered, a cruel smile forming on her lips. "That's a federal offense. Timothy, did you hear that? He just threatened me." Timothy looked down at his shoes. I didn't hear anything, Patricia." "He threatened my safety," Patricia shouted, her voice carrying into the cabin. Mr. Caldwell turned around in his seat. "He said he was going to get me." Damien stepped back, hands raised. "I asked for your employee ID." "That's it," Patricia said, reaching for the interphone handset on the wall. "I'm calling the cockpit. We're diverting. You're going to jail, honey." The atmosphere in the first-class cabin shifted from awkward to electric. The other passengers stopped eating. Mr. Caldwell put down his fork, looking delighted at the show. "Captain, this is Patricia," she said into the phone, maintaining intense eye contact with Damien. "We have a level 2 threat in the first-class cabin. Passenger in 1A, belligerent, aggressive, and just made a verbal threat against my safety. Yes. He's standing over me right now. Yes, I feel unsafe." Damien stood perfectly still. He knew that in the post-9/11 world, the word of a flight attendant was law. If she said he was a threat, the pilots would lock the door and land the plane. He could be dragged off in handcuffs before he ever got a chance to explain he owned the company. Patricia hung up the phone. She looked triumphant. "Captain Anderson is going to make an announcement," she gloated. "Sit down. Now, or I will have the other passengers restrain you." "You are making a mistake that will cost you your career," Damien said quietly. "Sit down," she screamed. Damien returned to seat 1A. He didn't sit, though. He reached into his duffel bag. "He's got a weapon!" Patricia shrieked. diving behind the galley wall. "He's reaching for a gun!" "It's a laptop, you lunatic!" Damien shouted, pulling out a sleek carbon fiber MacBook. He flipped it open. The onboard Wi-Fi was slow, but it connected. He logged into the AeroVantage secure corporate server. His access credentials had been activated 2 hours ago. "Welcome, Mr. Sterling." Access level: Administrator Owner. He navigated to the flight operations dashboard. He saw Flight 882. He saw the crew manifest. Purser: Patricia Halloway, 15 years service. Captain: Michael Anderson. He clicked on the In-Flight Communications tab. He could send a direct text message to the flight deck printer, a channel usually reserved for ground control or emergency operations. He typed furiously. "From Damien Sterling, CAO Chairman, AeroVantage Holdings. To Captain Anderson, Flight 882. Message: The purser is fabricating a security threat. I am in seat 1A. Do not divert. Come to the cabin immediately. Verify my identity via corporate ID 00001. He hit send. Seconds later, the fasten seatbelt sign dinged on. "Ladies and gentlemen," the pilot's voice came over the PA system. It was tense. "We are experiencing a passenger disturbance. We may be looking at an emergency diversion to Boston. Please remain seated." Patricia marched down the aisle, holding a set of plastic flex cuffs, the kind used to restrain unruly passengers. She was flanked by Mr. Caldwell, who had volunteered to help. "Stand up and turn around," Patricia commanded, snapping the cuffs. "You're going in the back." "Yeah, listen to the lady," Caldwell sneered, rolling up his sleeves. "We don't want trouble, son." Damien didn't look at them. He was watching the cockpit door. "I said stand up." Patricia reached for Damien's arm. At that exact moment, the heavy, reinforced cockpit door clicked and swung open. Captain Anderson stepped out. He was a large man with silver hair and 4 stripes on his shoulders. He looked furious. He held a piece of paper in his hand, the message Damien had just sent. Patricia's face lit up. "Captain, thank God, he's right here. He threatened to kill me. Mr. Caldwell heard it." "I sure did," Caldwell lied smoothly. "Said he was going to take the plane down." Captain Anderson ignored Patricia. He ignored Caldwell. He walked straight up to seat 1A. He looked at the man in the hoodie. He looked at the message in his hand. He looked at the iPad he was carrying, which displayed the photo of the new company owner sent by HQ that morning. The resemblance was undeniable. The captain's face went pale. He swallowed hard. "Mr. Sterling?" the captain asked, his voice trembling slightly. Damien closed his laptop. He looked up at the captain, then slowly shifted his gaze to Patricia, who was holding the handcuffs. "Captain Anderson," Damien said, his voice ice-cold. "Why is your purser trying to handcuff the man who signs your paychecks?" The silence in the first-class cabin was heavier than the pressurized air outside. Everyone was looking at the trio in the aisle, the captain in his uniform, the purser with the flex cuffs, and the billionaire in the hoodie. Captain Anderson lowered the paper. His hands were shaking visibly now. He looked at Patricia, then back at Damien. He didn't just see a passenger anymore. He saw the man who controlled the fate of the entire airline, the man whose signature was on the acquisition documents sent to the pilots' union email that morning. "Patricia," the captain said, his voice unusually quiet. "Put the cuffs away." "Captain?" Patricia blinked, her mouth hanging open. He hacked the system. He's sending fake messages to the flight deck. That proves he's a cyber terrorist. We need to restrain him and descend to Boston immediately." "I said," Captain Anderson roared, causing Mr. Caldwell to jump back into his seat. "Put them away." He turned to Damien and stood at attention, a reflex from his military days. "Mr. Sterling, I offer my sincerest apologies. I had no idea you were on board. The manifest listed a D. Sterling, but we assumed... Well, we didn't assume it was the chairman. Because I'm not wearing a tie, Captain, Damien asked, raising an eyebrow. Because of a failure in protocol, sir, Anderson corrected himself quickly, sweat beading on his forehead. A failure, I assure you, will be addressed. Patricia looked between them, her face flushing a deep, blotchy red. She wasn't scared yet. She was indignant. She had been the queen of cabin 882 for 15 years. She wasn't about to be dethroned by a misunderstanding. "Mike, what are you doing?" she hissed, dropping the formality. "You're letting this thug intimidate you? Look at him. He's probably high. That ID is fake. I'm the purser, and I'm telling you he is a threat to flight safety." Damien didn't look at her. He kept his eyes locked on the captain. "Captain Anderson, I'd like you to verify something for me. Patricia here claims that there are no meals loaded for seat 1A. She claims the catering company made an error. She also claims I threatened her life. I'd like you to check the catering manifest and the flight deck voice recorder logs from the interphone call she just made." "The catering manifest is in the galley," the captain said. He stepped past Patricia, forcing her to press herself against the cabin wall to let him pass. He walked to the galley. Timothy, the young flight attendant, was cowering in the corner, holding a coffee pot like a shield. "Timothy!" the captain barked. "Open the warmer oven, now!" Timothy scrambled. He unlatched the heavy metal door of the convection oven. Steam poured out, smelling of truffle oil and roasted beef. The captain counted. 1, 2, 8. He turned around. "There are 8 lobster thermidor and wagyu beef entrees here, Patricia. There are 8 passengers." "Why did you tell Mr. Sterling there was no food?" Patricia stammered. I was saving it. In case a pilot needed a meal. Or if one dropped. It's standard reserve protocol." "There is no such protocol," the captain said, his voice hard. "And the threat? You said he threatened to kill you." "He was aggressive," Patricia yelled, pointing a shaking finger at Damien. "He got in my face. He used body language that was suggestive of violence." Damien stepped forward. He pulled his phone out and tapped the screen. "Actually," Damien said, "I've been recording audio since I sat down. It's a habit from board meetings. Would you like to hear the playback, Patricia? Specifically the part where you called me a hood rat and admitted you were denying me service because of how I look." The color drained from Patricia's face so fast she looked like a corpse. Mr. Caldwell, the man in the trench coat, suddenly found his shoes very interesting. He picked up his menu and pretended to read it, trying to make himself invisible. "Captain," Damien said, "I don't want to divert. I have a meeting in London I cannot miss, but I will not be served by this woman. And I don't trust her to be in charge of the safety of this cabin." "Understood, sir," Captain Anderson said. "Timothy?" Yes, Captain." "You are now the purser for this flight," Anderson commanded. "Patricia, you are relieved of duty effectively immediately. You will sit in the crew rest seat in the rear galley. You are not to speak to passengers. You are not to handle food. You are not to leave that seat until we touch down in London." "You can't do this!" Patricia shrieked. "I'm the union rep. I'll have your badge, Mike. I'll sue the airline. I'll sue him." She jabbed a finger at Damien. "You can try," Damien said softly. "But you're suing your employer, and I have very, very good lawyers." "Go to the back, Patricia," the captain ordered. "Now, or I will use those flex cuffs on you for interfering with a flight crew member." Patricia let out a sound of pure rage, a strangled cry of humiliation. She stormed down the aisle, past the staring eyes of the business-class passengers, marching toward the economy section like a prisoner walking to the gallows. Damien let out a long breath. He looked at Timothy. The kid was shaking. "Timothy," Damien said gently. Yes, Mr. Sterling. "I believe you have a job to do. I'm seat 1A, and I'm starving." The rest of the flight was surreal. Timothy, empowered by the sudden promotion and terrified of messing up, provided the best service Damien had ever experienced. The Wagyu beef was perfect, the champagne was cold, but the atmosphere in the cabin was thick with tension. The other passengers in first class were exchanging nervous glances. Mr. Caldwell, in particular, looked like he was about to have a heart attack. He had spent the first hour of the flight insulting the man who now clearly owned the plane. Damien finished his meal and wiped his mouth with the linen napkin. He felt human again. He powered up his laptop. He had work to do. But first, he needed to address the elephant in the room. He stood up and turned to face the small cabin. "Ladies and gentlemen," Damien said. His voice wasn't loud, but it commanded attention. The 7 other passengers froze. Mr. Caldwell choked on his wine. "I apologize for the disturbance earlier," Damien began. "I know you paid a premium for this experience, and having the purser scream and threaten an arrest isn't part of the brochure. It's quite all right," a woman in 2A said weakly. "No, it's not," Damien corrected her. "It was unprofessional and unacceptable. My name is Damien Sterling. As of this morning, I am the CEO of AeroVantage. I want you to know that what you saw, the discrimination, the lies, the profiling, is exactly what I bought this airline to destroy." He walked over to seat 1K. He looked down at Mr. Caldwell. Caldwell was sweating. "Look, Mr. Sterling, I was just joking earlier. You know, just flight banter. I didn't mean anything by the riff-raff comment. It was a misunderstanding." Damien smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. "Mr. Caldwell, isn't it?" Damien asked. "I believe you hold a diamond medallion status with us?" Yes, for 10 years. Caldwell nodded vigorously, hoping this would save him. "I spend $50,000 a year with your airline." "Not anymore," Damien said. Caldwell froze. "What?" "Timothy," Damien called out. "Yes, sir." Timothy appeared instantly at his side. "Take a note. Mr. Caldwell's account is to be flagged for review immediately upon landing. I want a full audit of his interactions with staff. And Timothy?" "Sir." "If he speaks another word to me, or to you, or makes one more derogatory comment about anyone's appearance, cut him off. No more alcohol, no more service. He can have water." "Understood, sir." Caldwell turned purple. "You can't do that. I paid for this seat." "And I own the seat," Damien replied. "Enjoy the movie, Mr. Caldwell." Damien sat back down. He connected to the in-flight Wi-Fi again. He opened a video conference link. It was 2 p.m. in London. The transition team was waiting in the boardroom on the ground. He put on his noise-cancelling headphones. "Gentlemen," Damien said into the microphone, "we have a situation. I need the HR director and the chief legal officer to meet flight 882 at the gate. Yes, personally. Bring the termination paperwork for employee ID. Borto 9221. Cause: gross misconduct, falsifying security threats and discrimination. Also bring the police. I want to file charges for filing a false report with the captain." He paused, listening to the voice on the other end. "No," Damien said firmly. "No severance. No NDA. I want this public. I want every employee in this company to know that if they treat a passenger like garbage because of how they dress or the color of their skin, they won't just lose their job, they'll lose their career." He closed the laptop. 3 hours later, the plane began its descent. The mood in the cabin was somber, but in the back of the plane, things were heating up. According to Timothy, who came by with a fresh hot towel, Patricia wasn't sitting quietly. She was in the back galley, loudly telling the economy passengers that the black guy in first class was a hijacker who had brainwashed the captain. She was trying to rally a mob. "She's telling them you have a bomb, sir," Timothy whispered, looking terrified again. "Some of the passengers in row 40 are getting agitated. They're scared." Damien sighed. "She just doesn't know when to quit, does she?" "What should we do, sir? The captain is locked in the cockpit for landing procedures." Damien unbuckled his seatbelt. "Take me to the interphone, Timothy, the one that broadcasts to the whole plane." "Sir, passengers aren't allowed." "Timothy, right this way, sir." Damien walked to the front of the cabin, picked up the PA handset, and pressed the button marked All Call. Ding-dong. The sound resonated through the entire 300-seat aircraft. In the back galley, Patricia froze mid-rant. She had been telling a terrified grandmother that they were all going to die if they didn't storm first class. "Good afternoon, everyone," Damien's voice boomed through the overhead speakers. It was calm, deep, and steady. "This is Damien Sterling, speaking from the first-class cabin." The passengers looked up. Who was this? Why wasn't it the pilot? "I am not the pilot," Damien continued, answering their thoughts. "I am the new owner and CEO of AeroVantage Airlines. I'm speaking to you because there is a rumor being spread in the back of the plane by a flight attendant named Patricia." In the back, Patricia lunged for the phone in the rear galley to cut him off, but another flight attendant, tired of her bullying, body-blocked her. "Patricia is currently telling people I am a security threat," Damien said. "She is doing this because earlier today, she tried to have me arrested for sitting in my own seat while wearing a hoodie. She is doing this because she is about to lose her job, and she is desperate." A ripple of murmurs went through the economy cabin. "I want to assure you," Damien continued, "we are safe. We are landing in London in 40 minutes. But because you have had to listen to her disruption, and because this is not the standard of service I expect for my airline, I am making a decision right now." He paused. The cabin was silent. "Everyone on board this flight, in economy, business, and first, will be refunded the full cost of their ticket." Gasps erupted. Cheers started in row 20 and spread backward. "Furthermore," Damien added, "you will all receive a voucher for a free round-trip flight anywhere we fly. Consider it an apology for the drama. I want to build an airline that respects everyone, whether you're in a suit or a sweatshirt." The cheering was loud enough now that Damien could hear it through the floorboards. "However," Damien's voice hardened slightly, "this offer excludes one passenger, the gentleman in seat 1K, who felt the need to assist Patricia in her harassment. Mr. Caldwell, your refund is denied." Laughter rippled through the first-class cabin. Mr. Caldwell pulled his trench coat over his head, like a child hiding from a monster. "Cabin crew," Damien said, "prepare for landing. And Patricia, please take your seat. The police are waiting for you at the gate." He hung up the phone. As he walked back to seat 1A, he felt the plane bank left. Below them, the lights of London were twinkling through the clouds. It was a beautiful sight, but the real show was going to be on the ground. The plane touched down smoothly, the reverse thrusters roaring like a round of applause. As they taxied to the gate, Damien saw them. Through the window he could see a jet bridge connected to the terminal. But waiting on the tarmac, right by the stairs where the crew would disembark, were 3 black SUVs and 2 police cruisers. The welcome wagon had arrived. The seatbelt sign turned off. Ding. Usually, this is the moment where everyone stands up and rushes to get their bags. But today, nobody moved. The passengers in first class stayed seated, watching Damien. They wanted to see what he would do. Damien stood up slowly. He put on his hoodie. He grabbed his duffel bag. "After you, Mr. Sterling," the woman in 2A said respectfully. Damien nodded. He walked to the door, Timothy opened it. The cool London air rushed in. Standing at the end of the jet bridge wasn't just the police. It was a woman in a sharp power suit, Sarah, his VP of operations, who had flown in on the supersonic jet to beat them here. And beside her was a tall, stern-looking man with a tablet, the HR director. But behind them stood a camera crew. "Why is there a camera?" Damien asked Sarah as he stepped off the plane. Sarah smiled, wicked. "Patricia went live on Facebook from the back galley about 20 minutes ago. She tried to tell the world she was being hijacked. The local news picked it up. They're here to see the hijacker get arrested." Damien laughed. It was a dark, satisfied laugh. "Perfect," Damien said. "Let's give them a show." He turned back to the plane door. "Captain Anderson, please have Patricia Holloway escorted off the aircraft first. I think the press wants a word with her." The massive Boeing 777 300ER groaned as the parking brakes engaged at Gate 24 of London Heathrow's Terminal 5. The engines, which had roared with the power of 115,000 pounds of thrust for 7 hours, spooled down into a high-pitched whine. Then silence. Inside the first-class cabin, the fasten seatbelt sign extinguished with a cheerful ding that belied the suffocating tension in the room. Usually, this sound triggers a chaotic rush of passengers standing up to grab their luggage. Today, nobody moved. The air was thick, heavy with the anticipation of what was about to happen. Damien Sterling remained seated in 1A. He looked out the window. Below, on the rain-slicked tarmac, the scene looked less like an airport arrival and more like a crime scene investigation. The flashing blue lights of 3 Metropolitan Police cruisers reflected off the wet concrete. 2 black Range Rovers with tinted windows, the signature transport of high-level corporate security, were parked right next to the stairs. Damien zipped up his charcoal hoodie. He picked up his battered duffel bag. He looked at the other passengers, who were watching him with a mix of awe and fear. "After you," he said quietly. But the crew had other ideas. The cockpit door opened, and Captain Michael Anderson emerged. He looked pale, his uniform shirt damp with sweat despite the air conditioning. Behind him, Patricia Holloway, the purser, marched out of the rear galley. Patricia had spent the descent transforming herself. She had reapplied her red lipstick, smoothed back her severe blonde bun, and put on her blazer. She didn't look like a woman about to lose her job. She looked like a general marching to accept a surrender. She had convinced herself, through a manic internal monologue during the landing, that she was right. She told herself that Damien's hacking of the plane's comms system was a felony that trumped her refusal to serve him a meal. She was the hero. She was the whistleblower. "Open the door, Timothy," Patricia commanded, her voice shrill. Timothy, the young flight attendant who had been caught in the middle, opened the heavy aircraft door. The cool, damp English air rushed in, smelling of jet fuel and ozone. Patricia stepped onto the jet bridge first. She wanted the first photo. She wanted to be the face of the evening news. The jet bridge was a long, sterile tunnel of glass and steel. At the far end, through the glass doors leading into the terminal, a chaotic sea of camera flashes erupted. The paparazzi were there. The news crews were there. Patricia's Facebook Live video had gone viral, but not in the way she thought. The headline wasn't, "Brave Stewardess Stops Hijacker." It was, "Airline CEO Held Hostage by Racist Crew." But Patricia didn't know that yet. She strode down the walkway, her heels clicking loudly on the metal floor plates. As she neared the exit, she saw the wall of uniforms. 4 officers from the Metropolitan Police Aviation Security Command stood with their arms crossed. Patricia stopped 10 feet from them. She pointed a manicured finger back toward the plane door, where Damien was just stepping out, his hood pulled up against the chill. "Officers!" Patricia shouted, her voice trembling with theatrical outrage. "Thank God you're here. That's him! The man in the grey hoodie. He is a cyber-terrorist. He hacked the flight deck computers. He threatened the safety of my aircraft. Arrest him immediately." The silence that followed was deafening. The camera shutters clicked furiously, capturing her accusatory finger, her twisted face, and the calm, stoic figure of Damien Sterling standing behind her. A tall, imposing officer with silver hair and the chevrons of a sergeant stepped forward. His name tag read SGT, Reynolds. He didn't look at Damien. His steel grey eyes were locked onto Patricia. "Are you Patricia Holloway?" Sergeant Reynolds asked. His voice was deep, authoritative, and completely devoid of warmth. "Yes, I am the purser," Patricia said, puffing out her chest. "I am the one who reported the incident. I demand you put that man in handcuffs before he hurts someone." Sergeant Reynolds slowly reached to his utility belt, but he didn't reach for his taser. He reached for a pair of heavy, stainless steel handcuffs. "Patricia Holloway," Reynolds said, his voice booming so the press behind the glass could hear every syllable. "I am arresting you under Section 1 of the Aviation Security Act for communicating false information, endangering the safety of an aircraft, and under the Public Order Act for racially aggravated harassment." Patricia blinked. Her brain couldn't process the words. Excuse me?" "Turn around," Reynolds barked. "Hands behind your back." "No!" Patricia shrieked, taking a step back. She looked wildly from the police to Damien. "You've got it wrong. He's the criminal. Look at him. He's wearing a tracksuit. He's from the projects. You're arresting the wrong person." "He is the owner of this airline, Ms. Holloway." A sharp, icy voice cut through the air. From behind the police line, a woman stepped forward. She was dressed in an immaculate black power suit, her heels sharp enough to kill. This was Sarah Jenkins, the Senior Vice President of Operations for AeroVantage. Beside her stood a grim-faced man holding a tablet and a stack of documents. Mr. Henderson, the Global Director of Human Resources. Sarah walked right up to Patricia, invading her personal space. She looked at the flight attendant with sheer disgust. "I am Sarah Jenkins," she said. "I flew in from New York on the corporate jet to handle this personally. You just tried to have your CEO arrested because you didn't like his outfit." I didn't know," Patricia stammered, the color draining from her face until she looked like a ghost. "He didn't have a badge. He looked like a thug. He looked like a passenger," Sarah snapped. "Mr. Henderson?" The HR director stepped forward. He didn't shout. He spoke in the terrifyingly calm, bureaucratic tone of corporate execution. "Ms. Holloway," Henderson read from the document in his hand. "As of Paturuan 4 hours Zulu time, your employment with AeroVantage is terminated with cause. The specific grounds are gross misconduct, discrimination, filing a false federal report, and insubordination. Because this is a termination for cause, you forfeit your severance package. You forfeit your pension contributions. You are stripped of your lifetime travel privileges, and you are hereby banned from all AeroVantage properties worldwide." "My pension?" Patricia gasped, tears finally spilling over her mascara-laden lashes. "I have 15 years. You can't take my pension. I have a mortgage. I have bills." Damien finally moved. He walked slowly down the jet bridge, the sound of his sneakers soft compared to the hard clicks of the corporate shoes. He stopped right next to the sergeant. "You should have worried about your bills before you decided to humiliate a paying customer," Damien said. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried a weight that silenced the entire tunnel. Patricia looked at him, really looked at him. For the first time, she saw the intelligence in his eyes, the exhaustion, and the immense power she had been too blind to see. "Mr. Sterling," she sobbed, her dignity completely gone. "Please. I made a mistake. I'm sorry. I'll apologize publicly. Please don't let them arrest me. Please don't take my job." Damien looked down at her. "You aren't sorry you did it, Patricia. You're sorry you did it to me. If I had been a 19-year-old student or a single father just trying to get home, you would have ruined their life without a second thought. You would have sent them to jail." He nodded to Sergeant Reynolds. "Get her out of here. Miss Holloway, you are cautioned that you do not have to say anything." Reynolds began reciting her rights as he spun her around. Click, click. The handcuffs locked around her wrists. The sound was crisp, mechanical, and final. Patricia let out a wail of despair as two constables grabbed her arms and marched her toward the terminal. The glass door slid open, and the flashes intensified. She was dragged into the blinding light of the media circus she had created, immortalized forever as the face of corporate racism. Damien didn't watch her go. He turned his attention to the plane. Captain Anderson was standing in the doorway, afraid to step onto the bridge. "Captain," Damien called out, "join us." Michael Anderson walked slowly toward the group. He held his cap in his hands, wringing the brim nervously. "Mr. Sterling," Anderson began, his voice shaking, "I want to go on record stating that I was misled by the purser. I followed protocol based on the information I was given. I had no ill intent." Damien stared at him. "Protocol? You're the captain, Michael. Protocol dictates that when a passenger is accused of a felony, you investigate. You didn't come out of that cockpit until I hacked your printer. You hid." "I was focusing on flying the plane, sir," Anderson lied weakly. "No," Damien shook his head. "You were focusing on avoiding conflict. You let a bully run your cabin. A captain who cannot lead his crew is a liability I cannot afford." Damien held out his hand. "Your badge. And your epaulets." Anderson's eyes widened. "Sir, you can't be serious. I'm a senior pilot. The Union will—" "The Union has already seen the video footage from the cabin," Mr. Henderson, the HR director, interjected, tapping his tablet. "They saw you threatening to divert the flight based on a lie. They aren't going to fight for you, Michael. It's over." With trembling hands, Captain Anderson unpinned the gold wings from his shirt. He slid the four-striped epaulets off his shoulders. He handed them to Damien. Without his insignia, he looked small, just a middle-aged man in a white shirt who had made a terrible choice. "You're fired," Damien said, handing the insignia to Sarah. "Escort him to security." As the captain was led away, head bowed in shame, the passengers from the flight began to filter into the jet bridge. They walked past Damien with wide eyes, whispering thanks for the refunds and free tickets. Then came Mr. Caldwell, the man in the beige trench coat who had spent the flight drinking Damien's champagne and calling him riff-raff, was trying to blend in with a family of four. He had pulled his coat collar up and lowered his head, trying to make himself invisible. "Mr. Caldwell!" Damien's voice was cheerful, almost friendly. Caldwell froze. He stopped walking. He slowly turned around, forcing a grotesque, terrified smile. "Ah, Mr. Sterling!" Caldwell laughed nervously, wiping sweat from his upper lip. "Quite the excitement, eh? Well, water under the bridge, as they say. I'm just going to grab my bags and— Mr. Davies!" Damien signaled to a massive man in a black suit standing by the door. This was the head of airport security. Davies stepped in front of Caldwell like a human mountain. "Mr. Caldwell, I need you to come with me to a holding room." "Holding room? What for?" Caldwell squeaked. "For a security review," Damien answered, stepping closer. "You see, Mr. Caldwell, you assisted Patricia in fabricating a security threat. You lied to the captain. You said you heard me threaten violence. That's a federal crime." "It was a joke," Caldwell pleaded, his arrogance evaporating. "Just banter." "Also," Damien continued, ignoring him. "I've just updated your customer profile. You are now banned from AeroVantage, permanently. And because we are part of the Global Sky Alliance, that ban extends to our 15 partner airlines. I hope you enjoy taking the train, Mr. Caldwell." "You can't do this! I'm a Diamond member!" Caldwell shouted as Mr. Davies grabbed his arm. "Not anymore," Damien said coldly. "Now you're just a liability." Caldwell was dragged away, shouting threats of lawsuits that everyone knew would go nowhere. Finally, the jet bridge was empty, except for the staff and one last crew member. Timothy. The young flight attendant stood by the aircraft door, clutching his small carry-on bag. He looked like he was waiting for the executioner. He had watched his boss get arrested and his captain get fired. He assumed he was next. Damien walked over to him. Sarah and Mr. Henderson followed. "Timothy," Damien said softly. "Yes, Mr. Sterling," Timothy whispered, staring at his shoes. I'll hand in my badge now, sir." He reached for his ID, his hands shaking violently. Damien reached out and stopped him. He gently pushed Timothy's hand back down. "Keep it," Damien said. Timothy looked up, confused. "Sir?" "Timothy, when I got on that plane, I was tired, I was dressed like a bum, and I was angry," Damien said. "Patricia saw a thug. You saw a passenger. You tried to bring me water when she told you not to. You served me with dignity even when you were scared. That is what character looks like." Damien turned to Sarah. "Sarah, what is the opening for the head of in-flight customer experience?" Sarah smiled, a genuine smile this time. "It's vacant, sir, based in the London HQ." "It's filled now," Damien said, looking back at Timothy. "Congratulations, Timothy. You're being promoted. You're going to run the training program for all our European crews. I want you to teach them how to do what you did today." Timothy's mouth fell open. "Me? But I've only been flying for 2 years. I'm nobody." "You're the guy who treated the CEO like a human being when nobody else would," Damien smiled. "That makes you somebody. Report to the office on Monday. And buy yourself a nice suit. You can afford it now." Timothy burst into tears, tears of relief and joy. He shook Damien's hand, mumbling thank yous, before running down the jet bridge, practically floating on air. Damien let out a long, heavy sigh. He rolled his neck, feeling the tension finally start to release. "Are you ready for the press, sir?" Sarah asked. "They're going to want a statement. This is going to be global news in an hour." Damien zipped up his hoodie all the way to his chin. He picked up his duffel bag. "Let's go," he said. He walked through the glass doors and into the terminal. The flashbulbs blinded him for a second. Microphones were shoved in his face. Reporters were shouting questions over each other. "Mr. Sterling, is it true you fired the whole crew? Mr. Sterling, why were you wearing a hoodie? Mr. Sterling, are you pressing charges?" Damien stopped in the middle of the concourse. He raised a hand, and the mob quieted down. He looked into the lens of the nearest camera, his gaze piercing and intense. "I want to make one thing clear," Damien said, his voice steady and projecting to the gathered crowd. "AeroVantage is under new management. The era of judging passengers by their clothes, their skin color, or their status is over." He gestured to the police cars outside, where Patricia was being loaded into the back seat. "I fired my crew today, not because they made a mistake," Damien continued. "Everyone makes mistakes. I fired them because they lacked humanity. They forgot that the person in seat 1A and the person in seat 40B are both human beings deserving of respect. Money doesn't wear a uniform. Karma doesn't care about your job title. And if you work for me, and you think you're better than the people you serve, you can find another job." He adjusted his bag on his shoulder. "Now, if you'll excuse me, Damien said, a small smirk playing on his lips. "I have a company to run, and I really need a burger." He walked through the parting crowd of reporters, flanked by his security team, moving toward the exit. As he stepped out into the London night, Damien Sterling didn't look back. He knew the message had been sent. The world was watching, and the lesson had been learned. Never judge a book by its cover. You never know when the book might just own the library. And that is the incredible dramatic conclusion to the story of Damien Sterling. It was a long journey from the rainy tarmac in New York to the police arrest in London, but justice was finally served. Patricia and the captain learned the hard way that arrogance and prejudice are the quickest ways to lose everything you've built. Meanwhile, Timothy proved that integrity and kindness are always rewarded, often when you least expect it. This story is a powerful reminder for all of us. In today's world, you can never judge someone's value by their appearance. You never know who you're talking to. That quiet person in the hoodie might be the one signing your paycheck tomorrow. If you enjoyed this long-form story and want to see more dramatic tales of instant karma, revenge, and justice, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow and tells me you want more epic stories like this one. Don't forget to subscribe and ring the notification bell so you never miss a new video. And tell me in the comments below, what would you have done if you were Damien? Would you have fired the captain too? I read every comment. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next story.